and now I want to go get some wings. I should have brought some to this conversation. Thank you, David.
Maybe that'll be your new format. You can just be the marketing podcast equivalent of Hot Ones.
Hi everyone, this is Modern Marketers by Think with Google. I'm Joshua Spanier, VP of Media Lab within Google Marketing. I've been having conversations with CMOs, publishers, and marketing leaders about how they define modern marketing. Through these conversations, I've been garnering valuable insights to share with my teams. And now I'm really excited to share these ongoing conversations with all of you. Today I'm here with David Mogensen, the Vice President of Marketing at Uber. Let's dive right in. So today, I'm very excited to have a conversation with David. Why don't you introduce who you are and where you work?
Sure. Cool. Thanks, Josh. It's good to see you. I think we've known each other for, I was trying to figure out, I think about 13 years. So we go way back, but my name is David Mogensen. I am the Vice President of Marketing for Uber, which means I am responsible for building the Uber and Uber Eats brands in about 70 countries around the world.
Thank you so much for making the time today. It's fun to have this conversation with modern marketers, which is the theme of this conversation. And let's get into it. What brands do you love outside of Uber, right? And I'll take Google off it because you used to work at Google back in the day. What brands in your personal life do you have a real affinity for?
I'm a big Nike fanboy. When I was a kid, I couldn't afford the cool Jordans. So now I have a whole collection of Jordans. I have a 10-year-old son who has helped me rediscover the joy of Legos. So I've got a bunch of like Lego Technic sets. Really think the Lego brand is pretty phenomenal. And then at a larger adult scale, I was always a big car guy ever since I was a kid. And so Porsche is a brand that I have always kind of yearned for and loved. So those are a few, but for me, it's all about reliving my childhood dreams and actually being able to now, as an adult, realize some of them.
Awesome. I always wanted one of those jukeboxes that they had on Happy Days or whatever, all those sort of 50s shows with the bubbles which went over the top.
Totally. It's not too late, Josh. It's not too late.
What do you consider your strengths at work versus not strengths, as much as you're willing to reveal here?
This is the honesty part of the show.
Yeah, I guess.
I would say, hopefully there's a decent sized list of both. I think I'm pretty good at connecting strategy to creative. I think if I were to say sort of my superhuman strength, it's probably that from a work standpoint. I think my weakness, one of them is certainly I'm not particularly good at schmoozing or networking or kind of working the room, which I find a lot of my peers are much better at than I am. I'm a little bit more introverted, and that's something I need to kind of force myself out of my comfort zone on.
So is there a marketing campaign idea or execution you've seen recently over the last couple of years that you're like insanely jealous of and thought they killed it? I wish we'd thought of that, or that's just super aspirational for a great marketing.
One that comes to mind for me, Heinz ketchup. What they realized was a lot of restaurants will, buy Heinz once and then they'll refill the container with substitute, less expensive ketchup. And so they changed the labels on Heinz recently, and they made them the exact Pantone, the exact color of red of their ketchup. So if someone replaced the ketchup with a different, lesser ketchup, you would know because the label wouldn't match what was in the bottle. I think that's just such a brilliant use of packaging and design to solve a problem. So I'm pretty envious of that one.
They did something else last year. I love that idea you talked about. They did where they partnered with Absolute Vodka, and they were making a vodka marinara sauce using Heinz. And so they basically took the ketchup bottle and put it inside the Absolute bottle, that famous ad campaign, which has existed for sort of 30 years. Just a super clever print and then digital execution. Just a funny idea, but I love the mashup of two big advertising brands coming together to make something interesting and engaging. So there you go. Kudos to the Heinz marketing team. What is one of your favorite YouTube creators or YouTube moments for you?
Well, that's two different questions. YouTube moments, I would have a long list because I worked for YouTube for many years and it holds a special place in my heart. My favorite YouTube moment was actually the very first time we did an event called Brandcast, which is a big showcase for advertisers of all things YouTube. And they've done them now for, I think, 10 years or so, if my calendar or my timeline is correct. But working on the very first one, it was a huge bet and it was a huge gamble. And it was one of the biggest moments of pride I've had in my career. So that was the biggest moment. In terms of YouTube creators and who are the YouTube creators I love, one of the ones that I really love it's a show called Hot Ones with a guy named Sean Evans, where he interviews celebrities. I think it's a genius format because everyone is so sort of prepared and prepped for a typical TV interview, but you can't be prepared and prepped after you've had 7 or 8 incredibly hot wings. It completely takes down the facade and you get to see the very real people, which I absolutely love. He also asks brilliant questions that are really deep and nuanced relative to the typical surface level interview questions that you see on, Tonight shows. So Hot Ones with Sean Evans is definitely worth checking out.
That is a very fun show. I completely agree with you. And now I want to go get some wings. I should have brought some to this conversation. Thank you, David.
Maybe that'll be your new format. You can just be the marketing podcast equivalent of Hot Ones.
So the marketing industry has changed an awful lot over the decades, right? How's that impacting you? How are you seeing it? What do you feel is all this change that's happening in marketing right now in your role?
Yeah, look, I think marketing fundamentally is about driving impact for the business. And I don't think that is changing, but certainly the way that we do it is changing in lots of different ways. You can't open a website about marketing without seeing a headline about AI. I think AI will be probably the most transformational thing that happens to marketing certainly in a very big period of time. That said, I think a lot of it is still more talk than action, and it's yet to come. I actually think a lot about the fragmentation of audiences and the fact that now you've got all these different channels and all these different platforms. You think about streaming services where you've got Disney Plus and Hulu and Paramount Plus and HBO Max and Apple TV and ESPN and Netflix, and I'm probably forgetting some. You've got new social channels, which is having a huge impact on the way we approach marketing. When I was doing marketing campaigns for BMW, we might create 15 or 20 assets. Now we're creating hundreds, thousands, infinite numbers if you use AI, like the number of different platforms and building creative specifically for those platforms adds a degree of complexity that's really, really high. But we see that if we don't build for those platforms and we try to use sort of generic creative, it just doesn't work as well on a lot of these platforms, right? And so there's a huge degree of added complexity there. And then on the media side, you've got things like, how do you aggregate all these different platforms and try to have a sense of who you're reaching, at what frequency, what is your campaign impact, and how are you optimizing across those channels? So I would say more than anything in the last few years, it's that proliferation of channels and platforms that is really kind of changing the way that we're having to think about marketing and approach marketing.
Yeah, I think one of the questions which keeps our CMO up at night is truly understanding, we are investing all this money. What are we getting for it in total?
Yeah, I think that there's still an element of science and faith when you think about measurement. Like you have to have some degree of belief that what you're doing is working. You won't always be able to quantify every element of it, but certainly to the extent that we can, we try to get signals before we even run a campaign. We try to get signals during the flight, and then we try to understand post-mortem as well. So, I'm sure it's very similar to the way you guys approach it. And in fact, the whole see, think, do model that I think Google has helped pioneer is certainly part of the way we think about it as well.
Can you just expand a little bit for those who haven't heard about the see, think, do model that you referenced?
Sure. Quite simply, see is your reach kind of metrics, like how many people were exposed to your campaign. Think is things like favorability, lift in favorability, or lift in awareness. Like what did they think as a result of seeing it, and what impact did it have on those kinds of brand metrics? And then do is more your business impact metrics, whether that's incremental trips in our case, or incremental orders, or first trips, or what have you. So see is who saw it. Are you able to measure sort of the reach and exposure it got? Think is, did they change their perception in some way? And do is, did they take some action?
Really what I want to ask about is how you actually do it at Uber. I'm sure there is a daily and certainly weekly, like how many people are taking rides or ordering food, which lends itself to a very immediate turn up the dial, quick reaction, direct response, drive the numbers right now. How do you, and I guess your sort of wider leadership team, think about the long-term building the brand in must be a business where there is a huge pressure to deliver your daily ride numbers and your weekly delivery numbers?
One of the ways that I think about it is how do we achieve those short-term goals while also achieving a longer-term benefit to the brand? So if you look at a lot of the work that we do, it is ultimately about driving business impact in the short term, but we believe that we can do it in a fun and creative way that actually is also beneficial to the brand. So I'll give you a case in point. We've been an advertiser in the Super Bowl the last 3 or 4 years. If you look at last year's campaign, for example, which was all about driving our membership program, Uber One, it was very clearly a program designed to get people to sign up, and it did that very, very well. When we create a Super Bowl ad, I always challenge the team, like it should be a gift to the audience. Like it's not just about driving our impact, it's also about finding something that they will genuinely enjoy and want more of. And I think when you put those things together, you can drive longer term brand impact while also selling more Uber One memberships. So it's to kill two birds with one stone strategy for a lot of the bigger campaign work that we do. And then obviously, we see that through the funnel, and, we get a little bit more tactical as you go further down into the funnel. It's both the short-term impact on the business, but also trying to create it in a way that will drive favorability and preference for the brand in the longer term.
Can you just talk a little bit about your sort of approach to using influencers and celebrities? I particularly like the work you did with David and Victoria Beckham recently. Super funny, super capturing a cultural moment. How did that all come about? And just, love to unpack that a little further.
Sure. When we think about Super Bowl, I think there were a lot of articles this year actually about how celebrity has become more and more pervasive in Super Bowl ads. I think it was something like 70% of Super Bowl ads this year had celebrities. I think celebrity is a double-edged sword to some extent. It helps you drive breakthrough, which is hugely important during a major moment like Super Bowl. But you also run the risk of people remembering the celebrity more than they remember your brand or your product or your message. And so what we've really worked on with celebrity is how do you get the best out of a celebrity while serving the brief and serving what you need to do as a brand. And we always start first with the idea, and then we figure out, okay, what celebrities would play well into this idea? Whereas I think some brands start with the celebrity and then they sort of write something around the celebrity. And I think when you do that, there is a risk that you may create something really entertaining, but the thing that people remember about you is not your brand or your message. And so our latest Super Bowl campaign, which was all about this idea of, in order to remember one thing, you have to forget something else. And it was born out of the fact that a lot of people forget that we actually deliver more than just food delivery. We deliver grocery, and we deliver retail and what have you. And so we thought it'd be a fun idea to just take that straight on and create a campaign where we show people forgetting really obvious things. So we used Jennifer Aniston, for example, and David Schwimmer forgetting that Jen forgets that she had been on Friends with David, and it's a pretty funny moment. And one of the other celebrity talent that we used was David and Victoria Beckham, and she forgets that they forget the name of the Spice Girls, basically. And I think what you're referencing as well is we did a teaser for the Super Bowl with just the Beckhams, where we played off a meme that had been from the David and Victoria Beckham documentary on Netflix, where Victoria's talking about how her dad used to take her to school in a Rolls Royce. And so we had some fun with that, and it really kind of lit the internet on fire, as it were, for a couple of days. I would say in terms of how we think about something like that particular execution, Super Bowl is a little unique because you've got pre-Super Bowl, the Super Bowl itself, and then we always look to extend the campaign for many months. We don't just do a Super Bowl ad, we do a Super Bowl campaign, and we do a lot of additional creative that we roll out over the coming months. But when you look at the pre-Super Bowl phase, which is where the Beckham spot landed, it's really about driving word of mouth. It's about driving positive social sentiment. And so the types of things that we're tracking on that are much less business impact oriented than what we would typically do. It's much more about, did it drive favorability and did it drive brand attention?
One of the things we're seeing inside of Google is a sort of what you might call move to the middle. The ability to use, say, YouTube for direct response using video, which traditionally was, maybe more text-based or display-based, which is brand enhancing. At the same time, as television as a medium has struggled to deliver audience and ratings have declined around the world, You're seeing, shorter video. And I think we are getting towards that world where, is it brand, is it DR, goes away. And it's just, no, it's all driving business, and you can measure it on different metrics. So it seems very exciting. I'm certainly excited about how we're seeing video, the opportunity there in that space.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. We talk about that a lot as well. You used to create a very polished, perfect ad, and you sort of ran that everywhere. Now, like we see on TikTok, creating content with influencers 9 out of 10 times works better than the beautiful, polished creative that we would have created. And so you're starting to see a little bit of kind of a pulling down to some extent in terms of what that creative looks like.
It's really just something we think about a lot is, are we a house of brands or, one branded house? And you started out with Uber, right? Or core Uber, which everyone knows. And then you've added on Uber Eats, and you've made a conscious choice to make 2 different brands. Obviously, there are connection points there, but Uber Core, and I don't even know what you call it, versus Uber Eats. I'd love just to talk about how you think through this sort of delineation between these 2 product lines, and what the marketing and strategic challenges of having these 2 incredibly important pieces of your business, and how they work together, or how they have to be differentiated for consumers to understand.
For many people, Uber is synonymous with our rides business. It started as a rideshare business. It's click a button, get a ride. That's what people think about when they think about Uber. At some point, someone at Uber realized, hey, we have all these cars going all over the place. Like, maybe we could not just pick up people, but we could also deliver stuff with it. And thus Uber Eats was born. And when you think about it from a efficiency standpoint for the business, there's a lot of efficiency in that. Because like I said, you have these cars moving around, you can certainly deliver with them. But when you think about from a consumer lens, they're relatively distinct use cases, and they're 2 distinct apps. And so when you think about the marketing job to be done, it is often fairly distinct between those 2 businesses. And as a result of that, we end up doing marketing on both sides, as you've noticed. On the ride side, the goal is really right now trying to get people to think of it as more than just that core UberX experience that most people think of Uber for. And it's things like you can reserve a ride now. So it's not just tap a button, get a ride now, but actually tap a button, get a ride to the airport in a week. Or we've just launched a teens product here in the US where, parents who are too busy to cart their kids all around can now use Uber for their teens. And there's a bunch of safety elements built into that. Or in many parts of the world, taxis and other hailable products are on the platform. And so there's a lot of work to be done to build awareness of the broader offerings of Uber on the ride side. On the delivery side, it's all about getting people to think of Uber to deliver just about anything versus just delivering online food. And so we have pretty distinct needs in both those cases, which is why we end up doing, as you've said, marketing for both of them. And then there are times where a more of a parent brand message or a cross line of business message is appropriate. I already spoke a little bit about Uber One, which is our membership program, helps you save on both rides and eats. So there are times where it makes sense to talk as, sort of one Uber across our various businesses. And then there are times where it makes a lot more sense for us, because of what we're trying to do, to just focus on one side or the other.
Absolutely. So you're a global CMO. I know you spent quite a few years working in Europe earlier on in your career. You travel a lot now, and you have to sort of monitor the business around the world. Wherever you want to take this, but any insights or perspectives on the way Uber is perceived or understood, or the or behaviors that we may not realize sitting here in the US, or just learnings, observations from having worked in both the US for many years and also in Europe and other parts of the world?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think Uber is interesting because it's a tech company that exists in the physical world, which is a little bit different than a lot of, even like a Google, where it really is, more or less the same product everywhere you go. Uber in India or Uber in, parts of Latin America feels related, but still somewhat different from the Uber that you would experience here in the US. So for example, one of our most popular products in Latin America is Uber Moto, where you literally get on the back of a motorcycle with someone. And, in a place like Brazil, that's worth its weight in gold because you can navigate the traffic of Sao Paulo at in a way that you never could in a four-wheeled vehicle. But the idea of hopping on the back of someone's motorcycle in the US is such a foreign concept to us. I think it'll take a while before we launch Moto here. I think similarly, reputationally, the brand has different resonance in different parts of the world. There are places in the world where we are just universally loved and have been since our inception. And then there are other places where they're candidly quite skeptical of Uber. They're skeptical of a lot of large American tech in general. So you do see these changes or these differences when you go around the world, both in terms of the product as well in terms of the brand. And what we're really trying to figure out is, okay, how do we find a level of consistency for the brand so that if you are traveling, like I travel a lot, and I think you travel quite a bit as well, when you open the Uber app anywhere in the world, you know what that experience will be. But at the same time, from a marketing standpoint, because of these nuances and because of these differences, we actually do take a much more local approach to our marketing because the context is so different. On the Eats business, food culture in France is so different than food culture in Taiwan, for example. In Taiwan, people order delivery literally 15 or 20 times a month. Like, it is ubiquitous. It is the way that people get food in Taiwan. In France, there is a cultural stigma to not making your food yourself, like perceived as un-French if you are not making your own food and taking 6 hours to make that meal. And so there's a stigma to food delivery that is completely different. So those kinds of local differences really mean we have to take a local approach to our marketing while thinking about what are the things that are consistent for the brand everywhere and what are the things that we're okay to make different in France than we do in Taiwan.
You're part of people's communities and lives, and I know your company does a lot to give back and support communities. I was wondering if there's any particular program that you're particularly supportive of, or you personally really engage with.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really gratifying about working at Uber is the fact that we have this role to play in communities, whether that's things like when a disaster happens, we are right there on the ground, moving people. We provide free rides anywhere that we operate so that we can get people out of harm's way. We've done a lot of work, for example, in the Ukraine throughout the war there, where we've not only moved people, but we've actually also helped the Red Cross and other organizations for their core operations. And so it's really gratifying when we're able to play a core role in communities, not only as an everyday service, but also in times of need. We also do a lot of work even within marketing in terms of community and community building and thinking about things like diversity and inclusion. So, for example, when we do shoots for various campaigns, we work with a company called Free the Work, which is trying to put underrepresented talent behind the cameras and training them on things like being a director or being a director of photography. We also work with an organization called Invoke Insights, where we actually take data on every single person that is on set, and we try to ensure that we are having a diverse makeup within our shoots. So there's a lot of work that we do on the campaign side, as well as obviously trying to be representative in terms of who we show in front of the camera as well. But I'm really proud of a lot of the work we do behind the scenes in order to ensure diversity on our sets.
Nice. Well, and knowing who you are and what you want to do, that's a pretty important thing for all of us. Thank you. So I'm trying to end each episode on a truly positive note. So I've labeled this section 3 cheers. I'd love to hear from you this year into next year. What are 1, 2, or 3 things that you're giving 3 cheers for? It could be outside of work, but I think people would find interesting from an Uber perspective and marketing perspective. What are you excited about coming up?
We have been on this journey towards showing that we are a brand that can deliver anything. And we have this new creative campaign called Get Almost Anything, which it's the almost that's the fun part of that message. You can have a lot of creative fun in almost getting anything. And we are rolling that out around the world in, I think, 10 or 11 different markets, which is actually not how we always operate. We often create very distinct campaigns in each market because of the local nuances of each of those markets. market. So this is the first time that I can think of in the 4+ years I've been here where we really are rolling out a global campaign, but locally executing it. So Get Almost Anything will be the umbrella and the creative idea, and then each market will figure out what does it mean for that market. But I'm really excited to roll that one out. I'd say another thing that I'm excited about is we have our annual product event where we highlight new products that are and features that are coming from Uber in the coming months and years. We call it Go Get, and it's happening in May. So that's an exciting one that the team is working towards. And then I guess the third one that I'm excited about, this is a little bit marketing geeky, but we've been doing a lot of positioning work around the Uber mobility brand and how do we want to sort of position that brand to the world. And really it's about some of what I think we've been talking about today, which is reminding people the role that Uber plays in communities and in their lives. And so I'm excited for that to turn into some external work. We've been thinking a lot about it internally and how do we want to position the brand. And this is kind of the newest iteration of that positioning. So excited to see that come to life.
Exciting. So it's going to be a busy, fun year for Uber in 2024 and beyond.
All years are busy at Uber.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate the time and really enjoyed this conversation and look forward to catching up again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Josh.
A huge thank you to my guest this week, David Mogensen, the Vice President of Marketing at Uber. If you like this episode, please subscribe to get the latest updates and the next recording as soon as it's ready. We'll see you next time for Modern Marketers by Think with Google.
Thank you for listening to Modern Marketers by Think with Google. Our host is Joshua Spanier. Modern Marketers is brought to you by Google and Attention. The podcast is produced by the Google Ads marketing team and Frankie Guadagnino, Nagina Niazmatova, and Emily Behrens for Attention. Our technical producer is Kevin Fisher. Modern Marketers is edited by Sean Colello, and this podcast is mixed and mastered by Andy Inglot. Our theme music is by Jerry Mattei. Thanks for listening.